Today, I'm going to tell you some of my experiences about moving to Istanbul and living here as a foreigner. Okay, so let's start with settling in. Full disclosure, I have never been to Turkey before deciding to move here. I didn't know anyone in the country. I had no idea what to really expect. So my first impressions were based off of no information at all. I did not do as much research as I probably should have, but it all made the experience a little bit better. So, settling in. I moved here in 2020 in September. I started working immediately. I took a flight from Chicago on Sunday, arrived here Monday, like afternoon, and then went to work on Tuesday. I was staying with a coworker in her apartment. She offered to host me for a little while. This turned out to be a month, which we were both not expecting. But it took a long time for me to find an apartment because I was also working at the same time. I don't speak any Turkish, so I couldn't just call the landlord or a realtor to ask to see an apartment. I also didn't know where to look necessarily. So luckily, the school that I was working for, they were very helpful in helping me find an apartment. It was just a very slow process because I would look on the website that they gave me, find something that I like, tell the person at the school which apartment that I liked, and then she would make arrangements for me to go see that apartment. But this took a couple of days, and by the time everything was scheduled, the apartment was no longer available. It took a month to find an apartment. So I ended up just moving down the street from my friend just because that was the easiest thing to do. I wasn't looking at which neighborhoods would be best for me. I just picked the first thing available. But if you have more time to look, you can be a little bit more picky about which neighborhood and which area to stay in. Next, let's talk about some cultural differences. So I grew up in America, in Chicago, but I've also lived in the Czech Republic and Thailand. One of the hardest things about adjusting to life in Istanbul is obviously going to be the language barrier. After living here for 4 years, I still don't speak Turkish fluently or as much, but I haven't really had a need to really learn the language. I've just been able to get by with the couple of things that I know in Turkish and using English or Google Translate. I can also ask some coworkers or friends to help if I really needed help with something in Turkish. So for me, it wasn't a big deal that I don't know Turkish. I'm going to tell you the real deal about Turkish customs and traditions, beyond taking off your shoes before you enter someone's house. Biggest thing you should be aware of when you come to Istanbul is that everyone is always in a rush to go somewhere. And it's very different when you visit Istanbul as a tourist versus when you actually live here. As a tourist, everyone is always so nice to you. They want you to try their products, always offering you tea. But once you start living here, it's a completely different Istanbul. I've noticed that people tend to care about themselves, especially on the public transportation. You will have to push your way through the crowd because people will not move out of the way. Even if you ask them to move, they'll give you a little bit of attitude and then it might become an argument, but you really just have to push your way in. Let's move on to everyday life. So, my everyday life is I go to work Monday to Friday and I have the weekends off, evenings off. When I finish work, I usually will just go home. Sometimes I might go out after work with coworkers, meet a friend later in the evening, but generally I just come home and work on a couple of my own projects or do some errands like grocery shopping. I am not usually going out to the touristy areas like Taksim or the Old City, the Grand Bazaar. Like, I rarely will go over to the Old City because so much of what's in the Old City is available everywhere in Istanbul. So there isn't really a need to like go over there unless you're looking for something specific or you want to go to a specific shop over there. When I first moved here, I definitely took advantage of everything in the city because I've never been to Istanbul before. So, of course, I went to all the touristy areas. But after like the first year and a half, I stopped going to all the touristy areas, like doing all the touristy things. And it just became more like chill, more relaxed. I will say that the whole allure of Europe and Asia in Istanbul is not as exciting you are you are if you're a tourist here. Like, going to Asia from the European side as a tourist is really like exciting because it's the only place that you can do something like that in the world. But when you live here, it's kind of like, oh, I have to go to the European side, or I live on the Asian side. It becomes kind of like a burden almost. Like, it's something that takes extra time to do. Not that it's a bad thing. Like, it's really easy to go from one side to the other on like the metro bus or the ferry, but it just takes that extra time to plan where you're going to go on either side. For grocery shopping, it really doesn't matter where you go grocery shopping. I just go grocery shopping at Carrefour because it's the closest to me. There's also some local markets that have fresh vegetables and fruits that I can buy from as well. All of the like little markets accept credit cards, so it's never an issue like having cash or card. If you are looking for something specific from your home country, you can definitely try looking for it at Macro Center. They have a lot of international brands there that you might be able to find what you're looking for. For doctors, finding a doctor can be a bit tricky. There are some foreigner living in Istanbul like Facebook groups that are really helpful. I also am a part of the International Women of Istanbul group. It's a paid social group. They're really helpful in helping you settle into Istanbul. So I've found, I think, almost all of my doctors on Facebook or through the International Women of Istanbul group. I found a dentist, a dermatologist, gynecologist, like an ear, nose, and throat doctor. Generally, you can go to any of the hospitals. The hospitals will have translators to help you communicate with the doctor if they don't speak English. A good hospital to go to would be like Acıbadem or Medipol. Those are some hospitals that I've used before, and they've been really good with service, and I'm happy with the results that I've gotten from them. Next, let's talk about social life, because as a single female, it's very difficult to make friends in a new city when you have never been here before, you don't know anyone, and it can be a bit isolating. I found that many expats are from neighboring countries like Egypt, Iran, Libya, these countries that are close to Turkey. I haven't found that many like Western expats, like also from the United States or from the UK or from Australia. So anyone that you meet here, you have some sort of cultural difference, which makes it a little bit difficult to like relate to because you both grew up in different countries, experienced different things. So there will always be something that maybe it's a little bit difficult to relate to. I also feel like a lot of people have good intentions of wanting to become friends and make friends with new people, but they just don't want to put in the work to maintain the friendship. Also, a lot of people are constantly moving to different areas or coming to Istanbul for a few months, like 6 months or 1 year, and then you lose touch with that person, or life gets busy and you don't have time to meet. The friendship just kind of like fizzles out and there's nothing left anymore. So it's very difficult to maintain the friendship once you meet someone new, at least in my opinion. A good way to meet people is to join some like classes that you're interested in, for example, like a yoga class or like a pottery class. Like go to some of those groups and try to meet people that way. Of course, you will have like your coworkers if you're working here, but maybe you don't want to spend all of your time with your coworkers. I understand that. But it's always good to meet people based on your interest. You can also try searching on meetup.com, which is a good place to find some local events based on what your interests are. I've used this before in Thailand and it was really helpful meeting other expats on that website. All right, so the next topic is going to be work and finance. So before I arrived in Istanbul, I already had a job. I found the job on the school website. I didn't use an agency or any special website to find the job. I got really lucky with the employer. They were very helpful and prompt with their responses. I would say if you're looking for a teaching job, you should research some of the schools in the Istanbul area and find something that would be suitable for you based on your qualifications. A good place to look is also a Facebook group. I know I say this a lot, but the Facebook groups have been very helpful. So there's a Facebook group called Istanbul Green List and Istanbul Blacklist, and those list out the good and bad schools. So if you find a school that you're interested in applying to, look on those Facebook groups to see what other people have said about those schools and if it's like a school that you should continue to pursue to work at. If you are not looking for a teaching job, it can be a bit tricky because the Turkish employer will have to justify why they should hire you over a Turkish person. So your skills have to be really good and you should be able to speak Turkish as well as some other languages for them to justify hiring you. Some expats that I know have already been working for an international company and they get relocated here to Istanbul. So it's another option if you're already working for an international company is to put in some experience working for them and then ask if you can transfer to Istanbul. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend just coming to Istanbul and looking for a job because of the paperwork or the work permit. Also, make sure that the employer will give you a work permit. Some of them might be a little shady and not give you a work permit because it's such a process and it's expensive for the employer to do that for you. An industry that I would recommend looking for a job in is manufacturing because this industry is developing quite rapidly in Turkey. Okay, so now let's get into cost of living. This is a little bit difficult to talk about because the value of the lira is constantly changing. From what it was 4 years ago when I first arrived is completely different to what it is now. For example, when I first moved here, the price of the public transportation, like one ticket, was like 3.5 lira. Now it's about 18, like a little under 18 lira. So definitely a big difference in the price for that. The salaries have gone up to adjust to the inflation and the cost of living, which has definitely helped accommodate the expenses here. For me, as again a single female with no dependents, I spend about 25,000 to 30,000 lira a month. This includes like rent, utilities, food, any like extra things like going to restaurants or cafes. Occasionally I will order like food delivery or something, and sometimes I might go shopping, but it just depends on the month. But 25,000 to 30,000 is about how much I spend as a single person in Istanbul. I am not buying a lot of meat or dairy products that will definitely increase your grocery spending. I try to spend maybe 1,500 a week for groceries or food. I don't take taxis because I just haven't had a need to take them. I usually just take the public transportation with that monthly like Istanbul cart. I also don't buy too many like extra things. My apartment is furnished, so I didn't have to buy any like furniture or like decorations really. My walls are like super bare, but I mean I don't really feel like I need to decorate because I know that this is like a temporary place, even though I've been here for 4 years. It's not really that temporary, but I know that I'm not going to live here forever. So I don't buy things that I know I won't take with me when I move. Okay, so now for the fun stuff. Living in Istanbul is definitely really fun and exciting. And when you first come here, you'll want to do everything all at once. But remember, you are here for a couple of months, could turn out to be a couple of years. So you don't need to do everything all at once. The average person visits Istanbul for maybe 3 to 4 days, maybe a week, but as an expat living in Istanbul, you have the opportunity to dive deeper into different neighborhoods, get to know shop owners, have like your own local cafes that you like to go to, and stores that you like to visit. It gives you a better grasp of the culture and what it's like living here. One big advantage of living in Istanbul is the location of Istanbul in the world. I can easily go to Europe, Africa, Asia in a couple of hours versus if I were traveling from Chicago from the US, it would take 8 hours or more to go somewhere on the other side of the world. So being able to have access to so many travel opportunities is really cool because like growing up in America, you kind of fantasized about like Europe because it was so like far away, but now that I live like 4 hours away from like London and I can go there in a weekend, it's really like cool to say that you can do that. I know it's definitely a privilege with the US passport. Not everyone can just go to Europe. Lots of people need like visas and it takes a lot of time to plan those things. So I do realize that it is definitely a privilege to be able to do that. And I am grateful that I can have the opportunity to travel so much as an American. Being a teacher as well, you have a couple of breaks throughout the year. So I have been able to go to Germany for like a weekend or go to London for a weekend or take a couple of days during like the semester break and travel a little bit. I've been able to take maybe 4 or 5 trips a year, like quick ones and like one like long trip for the summer. So it's definitely something that I enjoy being able to do living in Istanbul. Okay, so now let's talk about some challenges about living in Istanbul. I mentioned this a little earlier, but the social isolation living in Istanbul can be very loud sometimes, let's say. There's this feeling of like not belonging. I'm not really sure how to explain it. It's like I am foreign. I'm not Turkish, but I do live here too. So I'm not a tourist. And it's just kind of finding that like balance of like, where do I fit in? There are, things that I won't understand about the Turkish culture because I'm not Turkish. I didn't grow up here. There are just some cultural things that I know I will never like understand. And then it's also the same for me, like meeting other people who are not American or who don't travel as much. There is this like divide between me and the other person that there's just something that they won't understand. It causes a bit of social isolation because you feel like no one understands where you're coming from. And it can be a bit hard to deal with living in a foreign country, not just Istanbul. Like I've definitely experienced this in Bangkok and Thailand as well, but it's just something that you have to get used to living abroad away from your culture, your like upbringing, everything that you know. Something a little bit more light is the lack of personal space that people in Turkey just don't care about. They will stand like so close to you waiting in line for something, or if you are like walking on the sidewalk and you step to the side because you want to like check something on the phone or like don't want to be like in the foot traffic. So sometimes I will like step to the side and look at something, but the people will like walk directly like in front, like I can touch them and they don't care that they're like inches from you. Like if I'm just holding my phone in my hand, like someone will just like bump into it and there's like no like buffer space. In the US, we are very aware of our personal space, our like bubble, and we apologize if we accidentally step into someone else's bubble. Everyone is always like at least like an arm's length away from someone, and like stepping like closer to someone is not welcome. It depends on the person, but we would always apologize if you accidentally step into someone else's like bubble. But in Turkey, in Istanbul, nobody, that bubble like does not exist at all. Like nobody will care about your personal bubble. You have to get used to people always being next to you all the time. So those were two challenges. Let's talk about the rewards of living abroad. So I've been living abroad since 2017 as a whole. And I don't think that people realize how difficult it is to leave everything behind, like leave all of your friends, your family, your like stuff, your comfort zone, and move to a completely new environment, start a new life, learn everything you need to like survive in this new environment. And you have to do it quickly, otherwise, you just won't adapt. People that have never left their country or have never spent such a long time away from the people that they know won't understand what that feels like. It does make you stronger as a person, like to grow individually and know that I moved across the world, started a new life. I have a job, I have an apartment. Like I was able to do this by myself with obviously help from other people, but nobody forced me to like leave. No one held me accountable for anything. It was all just my motivation and my desire to like learn about the culture, immerse yourself in different situations, and it definitely helps you grow as a person. So I would say that that is the biggest reward about moving abroad in any country or any city. Okay, so final thoughts. My final thoughts of living in Istanbul are just to embrace the chaos. It's going to be crazy and you're just going to have to learn to deal with it and become part of the chaos. You will definitely have good days and bad days, but if you stick it out, you'll be able to see how far you've come. I hope this video has given you some insight on what it's like living in Istanbul as a foreigner. I have created an ebook that is really helpful for new people that want to come here or are thinking about coming here. I've packed a bunch of information into 64 pages and it goes through the details of like finding a job, getting a bank account, finding an apartment, useful websites. Definitely check out this book. I'll link it down below. If you are an expat already living in Istanbul, let me know of any challenges that you have experienced while living here and what you like about living in Turkey. So thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.